He thought Thanksgiving was a night of gratitude, until his wife humiliated him in front of everyone. A joke at his expense, laughter echoing around the table. But what she didn't know was that something inside him snapped that night. He didn't argue. He didn't react. He simply decided this was the last time. What followed was a transformation she never saw coming. At first, she laughed it off. Then, she started noticing. By the time she realized what was happening, it was too late. He wasn't the same man anymore. But just when he thought he was free, she did something unexpected. And that changed everything. Want to know how it ends? Stay with me, because this story is just getting started. Thanksgiving was supposed to be a night of warmth, gratitude, and togetherness. A time to share a meal, laugh with family, and count our blessings. But that night, as I sat at the dinner table surrounded by people I had known for years, I never expected my wife to turn me into the evening's entertainment. The meal had been going well, conversations flowing, laughter filling the room. I was deep in discussion with my brother-in-law when suddenly, her voice cut through the chatter, sharp and laced with amusement. "Oh, come on," she said, loud enough to make everyone turn. "You guys should be thankful. At least you have something exciting going on. I can't say the same for what happens in our bedroom." Silence. Then, nervous chuckles. Some guests avoided eye contact, sipping their drinks or looking down at their plates. Others smirked, hiding their amusement behind their hands. My stomach tightened. My jaw clenched. The humiliation burned through me, but I forced my face to remain neutral. I could feel the eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd react. I could have snapped back. I could have made a scene. But what was the point? Calling her out in front of everyone would only make me look weaker. Instead, I lifted my glass, took a slow sip, and let the moment pass. But inside, something cracked. Because this wasn't just a joke. It wasn't just an offhand remark. It was deliberate. And the worst part? It wasn't the first time. I thought back to all the other times she had made similar jabs, not as obvious, not as direct, but enough to chip away at my dignity, little by little. She never did it in private. No, she needed an audience. Friends, family, coworkers, anyone who would listen. And I had let it slide. But this was different. The night dragged on, but I wasn't really there anymore. I smiled when necessary, laughed when expected, but my mind was elsewhere. My eyes followed her as she carried on like nothing had happened, as if humiliating me was just another casual conversation for her. When the last guest left and the front door clicked shut, the house fell into an eerie silence. The warmth of the gathering was gone, leaving behind only half-empty wine glasses and scattered napkins. I stood in the kitchen, rinsing a plate under the faucet, my mind replaying every second of that dinner table moment. I waited for her to say something, anything, an apology, a casual acknowledgement. But nothing came. She walked in, humming to herself, gathering a few glasses from the counter like she hadn't just humiliated me in front of everyone. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, and finally spoke. "So that little joke at dinner, was that really necessary?" My voice was calm, controlled. She barely looked up. "Oh, come on. Don't be so sensitive. It was just a joke." "Just a joke," I repeated, nodding slowly. "Right. A joke. And humiliating me in front of everyone, that's funny to you." She scoffed, placing the glasses in the sink. "No one even cared. You're acting like I insulted you in some serious way." Everyone was laughing. I stared at her, trying to understand how she could be so casual about this. No one cared. My voice was quieter now, colder. I could have kept going. I could have pointed out every other time she had done this. But I stopped myself. Because what was the point? She wasn't listening. She never listened. She grabbed a bottle of wine, poured herself a glass, took a sip, and smirked. "You always overreact. You're too sensitive." There it was. The way she always twisted things. Made me feel like I was the problem. Like I was too dramatic. For years, I had let it slide. I had ignored the jabs, the dismissive glances, the way she made me feel small. But tonight, something shifted. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I just watched her for a moment, then turned and walked away. Upstairs, I loosened my tie and sat on the edge of the bed. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I kept thinking about how easily she had mocked me, how confident she was that I wouldn't do anything about it. And for a long time, she had been right. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror. The man staring back looked tired, worn down. But beneath that exhaustion, something else stirred. No, not this time. This time, things were going to change. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The house was silent, except for the soft hum of the heater kicking on. I turned to look at her. She was still asleep, her face relaxed, peaceful. I felt nothing. No anger, no love, no regret. Just nothing. I got out of bed quietly, got dressed, and left the room without a word. There was no point in another useless conversation about last night. She had made it clear how little she cared. But something inside me had changed. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door without my usual morning routine of making coffee or checking emails. Instead, I drove straight to the gym. I hadn't been there in months, maybe even a year. Life had gotten in the way. Work, responsibilities, a marriage that made me feel more like an accessory than a partner. But as I stood outside, staring at the neon-lit sign, I realized the truth. I hadn't just let my body go. I had let myself go. I stepped inside, signed up for a new membership, and got to work. The first few days were brutal. My muscles ached, my lungs burned, and I felt out of breath faster than I remembered. But I pushed through, because this wasn't just about getting in shape. It was about taking back control. Every rep, every drop of sweat, every aching muscle. It was a reminder that I was reclaiming something I had lost. Outside the gym, I made other changes. Small ones at first. I started dressing better. No more baggy t-shirts and old jeans. I bought clothes that fit well, that made me feel better. I got a haircut, something I hadn't put thought into in years. I focused on my posture, on the way I carried myself. And at home, I didn't announce any of it. I didn't seek her approval. I didn't ask if she noticed. But I saw her watching. At first, she didn't say much. Just stole glances when I walked in from the gym. Let her eyes linger a little longer when I passed her in the hallway. She noticed, and I kept going. At work, I took on new projects, pushed myself harder, put in more effort. Not to impress her, not to prove anything, but to remind myself of what I was capable of. I reconnected with friends I hadn't spoken to in a while. Started making plans without checking with her first, without worrying if it was convenient for her. For years, I had lived on autopilot, moving through life in a way that made things easier for her. But now I was living for me. One evening, after coming home from the gym, I walked into the kitchen to grab a bottle of water. She was sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone. When she saw me, she put it down and tilted her head. "You've been going to the gym a lot lately." Her tone was light, but there was something underneath it. Something she wasn't saying out loud. I twisted the cap off my water bottle and took a sip. "Yeah." She waited, expecting me to say more. When I didn't, she forced a small laugh. "What brought that on?" I shrugged, leaning against the counter. Felt like it was time for a change. She studied me for a moment, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in her expression that I hadn't seen before. Uncertainty. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. I just took another sip of water, nodded, and walked past her. Left her sitting there, wondering what was coming next. Over the next few weeks, I kept moving forward. I didn't slow down. I didn't explain myself. I didn't seek her validation. And that, more than anything, seemed to rattle her. She started paying closer attention, watching me as I came home, eyeing my phone when it buzzed, throwing in casual comments about how I was acting different. But I wasn't acting. I was different. I wasn't waiting around for her approval anymore. At first, she pretended not to care, brushed it off, acted indifferent. But I could tell it was getting to her. One night, as I was getting ready to go out, something I never used to do without checking with her first, she leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Where are you going?" Her voice was casual, but I could see the tension in her face. "Out." I buttoned my shirt. "With who?" I grabbed my watch from the dresser and put it on. "Some friends from work." She let out a short laugh, shaking her head. "You never used to go out like this." I met her eyes through the mirror. "Yeah, I guess I didn't." Her lips pressed together. She wasn't used to this. She was used to control, used to me being predictable, always available, always bending to whatever fit her needs. But now she was the one feeling unsure. A few nights later, I was in the living room, responding to messages when she sat down next to me. "You've been really busy lately." I nodded. "Yeah." She hesitated. "You know, if something's wrong, you can talk to me." I almost laughed. Now she wanted to talk? After years of dismissing me? After brushing off every time I had tried to tell her how I felt? Now, when she could feel the shift happening, when she could sense she was losing her grip. I didn't take the bait. I didn't reassure her. I didn't tell her everything was fine. I just looked at her, held her gaze for a moment, then went back to my phone. That silence said more than words ever could. She started trying harder after that, cooking dinner more often, bringing up old memories, mentioning places we used to go when things were better. She tried to act like nothing had changed, like we could just fall back into our old roles. But I wasn't playing along, and she could feel it. The changes in her behavior were impossible to ignore. She started trying, harder than she ever had before. At first, it was little things. Compliments she hadn't given in years. "You look good today." She studied me like I was a stranger she was trying to figure out. I nodded. "Thanks." No excitement. No eagerness. Just a simple acknowledgement. She started texting me more during the day. "What time will you be home? Are you working late?" For years, she never cared. If I came home late from work, she barely noticed. Now she was suddenly interested in my whereabouts. One evening, as I was tying my sneakers for the gym, she leaned against the doorway. "You've really committed to this whole fitness thing." I nodded. "Yeah." She hesitated, then spoke again. "Are you doing this for someone?" I paused, looked up at her. For the first time in our marriage, I heard it. Insecurity. She was trying to figure out if I had already moved on, if there was someone else. I let the silence stretch between us. Then I stood up, grabbed my keys, and said, "I'm doing this for myself." And that was the truth. She didn't like that answer. She wanted me to say something that would make her feel safe again, something that would let her slip back into the comfort of knowing she had control. But I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. She pushed harder after that. One night, she cooked my favorite meal, a dish she hadn't made in years. She set the table, lit candles, even poured me a drink before I sat down. I took a bite. It was good. It always had been. But I wasn't going to pretend this was some magical fix. "This is nice," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She smiled, relieved. "I thought it would be. I know we've been a little off lately, but maybe we just need to spend more time together." I let her talk. I let her explain how things could go back to normal, how we could work on things. But the more she spoke, the more I realized something. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't acknowledging anything she had done. She was just trying to reset things back to the way they were. And I wasn't interested in that. Later that night, as she reached for my hand across the couch, I let her. But I didn't hold on, because I knew something she didn't. I wasn't the same man she had spent years belittling, and I was never going to be that man again. The shift between us was undeniable now. She could feel it. And for the first time in our marriage, she was the one feeling unsure. She started making last-minute plans for us. Dinners, weekend getaways, things she had never put effort into before. She wanted to go back to the version of us that had existed when she held all the power. But that version of me was gone. One evening, she came home earlier than usual. I was in the living room reading when she sat across from me. I was thinking. She tucked her hair behind her ear. "Maybe we should go on a trip. Just us. Get away for a while." I closed my book and looked at her. "Why now?" She shrugged, forcing a smile. "I just think we need it." No. She needed it. She needed to believe that I could still be pulled back into place, that she could smooth over the damage she had done with a few romantic gestures. But I wasn't interested in playing pretend. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. Her smile faltered. "Why not?" I sighed, setting the book down. "Because I'm done." The words landed heavy between us. She blinked, as if trying to process what I had just said. "Done with what?" she asked, her voice quieter now. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "Done with this. Done pretending that what happened at Thanksgiving was just a joke. Done ignoring the way you've treated me for years. Done being the guy you can take for granted." Her face tightened. "So that's it. You're just giving up on us." I let out a small laugh, shaking my head. "You gave up on us a long time ago. The only difference is, I finally noticed." She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but then she closed it. Maybe she knew I was right. Maybe she just didn't have the energy to fight anymore. For a long moment, she just sat there. Then she swallowed hard and nodded. "So what now?" I exhaled, standing up. "Now I move on." And I did. The next few weeks were a process. Sorting things out. Making arrangements. Figuring out what life would look like without her in it. But the truth was, I had already started moving on long before that conversation. The moment she humiliated me at Thanksgiving, something inside me had shifted. And from that point on, every step I had taken, every choice I had made, it had all been leading me here. To a life where I was no longer defined by the way she saw me. To a life where I chose me. The night I told her I was done, I felt something I hadn't in years: freedom. For too long, I had let myself be trapped in a marriage where I was nothing more than an afterthought, a punchline. But now, I was taking back my life. She didn't handle it well. At first, she ignored it, acting like I was just going through a phase, like I would come to my senses. Then came the anger. She accused me of overreacting, of blowing things out of proportion. You're really going to throw everything away because of one stupid joke? But it wasn't one joke. It was years of belittlement, years of being made to feel small, years of knowing that the person who was supposed to love me the most was the same one who enjoyed tearing me down. And I was done. The divorce process was ugly. She fought hard, not because she wanted to fix things, but because she didn't want to lose control. She dragged out the legal process, contested every little thing, made accusations that weren't true, anything to make it difficult. But I didn't break. I let my lawyer handle the paperwork. I didn't get emotional. I didn't engage in screaming matches. Because at the end of the day, I had already won. I was free, and she knew it. Outside of the legal battles, I kept building myself up. The gym was no longer just a place to escape. It became my temple. Every workout, every rep, every drop of sweat was a reminder of who I was becoming. A man with discipline. A man who was unstoppable. I didn't just change physically. I changed mentally. I carried myself differently. Walked into rooms with confidence I had forgotten I had. And people noticed. At work, colleagues who had once overlooked me now paid attention when I spoke. Friends who had drifted away started reaching out again. And women noticed too. I wasn't actively looking for anyone new. But for the first time in years, I saw the way they looked at me. Not with pity, not with indifference, with interest. One evening, I was leaving the gym when I saw her. She was standing near the entrance, arms crossed, watching me. I almost didn't recognize her. She looked different. Not physically, but in her expression. She wasn't confident. She wasn't smug. She wasn't the woman who had mocked me so effortlessly in front of others. She looked lost. I walked past her, not stopping. Wait. Her voice was softer than I had ever heard it. I exhaled, turned slightly. What? She hesitated. Can we talk? I glanced at my watch. I don't think that's a good idea. She bit her lip, shifting awkwardly. This was new for her. For the first time, she was the one who didn't know where she stood. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you, she admitted. It should have mattered. It should have meant something. But it didn't. Because the moment she lost control, the moment she saw me standing stronger than before, was the moment she decided to apologize. Not because she was sorry, but because she was scared. I nodded. Yeah, well, now you do. I turned to walk away. She reached for my arm. Please, just. I pulled away. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to play the victim now. She blinked rapidly, her lips parting like she wanted to argue. But she had nothing to say, because for years, she had been so sure she had me under her thumb. And now, she was realizing the truth. I was done. I walked away without looking back. She didn't follow. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the one who had lost something. I felt like the one who had won. Walking away from her that night felt like the final piece of a weight being lifted off my shoulders. I didn't look back. I didn't hesitate. I just kept walking. And with every step, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. The divorce was finalized a few weeks later. She dragged it out as much as she could, but in the end, she couldn't stop what was coming. I walked out of that courtroom a free man. No more walking on eggshells. No more wondering when the next insult would come. No more being the punchline to someone else's jokes. I was done, and I was never looking back. Life after her, it wasn't just better. It was mine. I kept up with the gym, pushed my limits, became stronger than I ever thought possible. I surrounded myself with people who actually respected me. I took on new projects at work, ones I would have never had the confidence to try before. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was actually living. Not surviving. Not enduring. Living. One night, months after everything had ended, I was at a bar with some friends. It was different from the life I used to know. I wasn't looking for approval. I wasn't seeking validation. I was just there, enjoying the moment, enjoying being me. Then, a woman approached me. Not aggressively. Not flirtatiously. Just with a quiet, effortless confidence. You look like you're deep in thought, she said, smiling. I chuckled, taking a sip of my drink. Maybe a little. Anything worth sharing? She asked, tilting her head. I studied her for a second. She wasn't fishing for an ego boost. She wasn't looking to tear someone down for amusement. She was just genuine. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I was ready for something new. Not a replacement. Not a distraction. Something real. I smiled back. Yeah, maybe. And just like that, I moved on. Not because I needed to prove anything. Not because I needed someone to fix me. But because I had already fixed myself. And now? Now, I was ready for whatever came next. On my terms. In my own way. And with someone who actually saw me for who I was. Not as a joke. Not as an afterthought. But as a man who knew his own worth. And would never let anyone take it away again. The end.